So right now, you're seeing Canada and parts of it, if not the entire border where we share, is all lit up on fire once again. It hasn't really stopped. We see families trying to get back into their homes to save pets or others, where the local cops are putting just road spikes on the road to prevent them. Firefighters are watching from abroad. And we asked, where are they getting the orders to stand down? Well, it's coming from the RCMP, the
Mhm.
Mounties, who take direct orders from Justin Trudeau. I think that the awakened Canadian is outnumbered.
Oh, big
I've
time.
seen it. I've seen a Canada that's given up their firearms.
They're trying to push that. They are trying
Right.
to do that, but it hasn't happened yet. They're going through that process, and there's been a lot of pushback on that particular issue, actually, because there is actually per capita, Canada's firearms is actually higher than the states, believe it or not, because that we have so many hunters and we're such a wild country because we're so spread out. 40 million people across the second biggest country on the planet is very, very sparse.
Big. It's a big hunting. Yeah, I know a lot of people go routinely to Canada to hunt.
Mhm.
So, but they're coming for the guns. They put legislation in through the pandemic years here, which was like people are like, what? So, but they're taking the orders are from top down,
Yeah.
and the brute force, as Henry Kissinger called these the dumb barbarians, they're in the way, and they're going to take orders because the average barbarian, the security apparatus, they're not awake. These cops are not awake. Majority of them, they're there for because the institution, as you said earlier, attracts that sociopathic, power hungry person who knows they're going to be protected and get away with everything they do. My question is, and my statement is, I think it's going to come down to special forces of the United States and perhaps Russia or other countries to free and liberate Canada. And then essentially, once that happens, the true top down directives, this is coming straight out of Switzerland, Europe, the Third Reich that turned into the Fourth. So that's how I see it. I think it's going to come down to special forces from both of our countries, if not others, to root out the enemy in North America. What say you on that front, Bryce?
Potentially, and here's why I say potentially. So, this is actually something that I've said to explain this idea quite a bit. So I'll just kind of go through it. So everybody is going to have a choice. Every single person in every single city, in every single country, and in the entire planet is going to have this choice. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter who you are. You have this choice between these options, and there's only three. Okay, so the first option is what most people are going to be, what most people, like the majority of the population of the planet, are probably going to do, because they don't know any better, and that's submission. So if the government tells you to do something, that's what's happened. So that's what those people will do. And so the reason for that is that the majority of people just don't know. They don't look into this stuff. They're not aware of all of these things happen. Like, you got to you got to understand that most people do not spend a lot of time looking at this. Most people just want to spend time with their family, live their life, and try to be happy. And all of this stuff happening makes this a lot more difficult. But for the vast majority of the people, when the government says stuff, they're just like, oh, well, that's what they do. That's what I'm going to do because they care about me. The ridiculous idea that is. But that aside, that's probably what's going to happen for most people. Okay. So the second option is revolution. So this is what's happened, hundreds, if not thousands of times over history. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I give it a 50-50 whether or not that is actually going to achieve the success or or getting rid of the oligarchy as it stands, or the authoritarians if you're in the East. And the third option, which is the most difficult, is a renaissance. So we've only ever had one renaissance and the reason for that renaissance is that the ability to give information out to people vastly increased in speed. So what was it? The printing press, pre-printing press. You had a very slow education of people because it was basically one-on-one, right? So the difference with the printing press was it was one to many at scale. That's the difference, right? So now you could print things, you could get stuff out there, you could have newspapers and all this different stuff. That's what the printing press allowed, right? And so now with the age of the advent of the internet, and I grew up on the internet, so I'm 36, right? So I grew up basically believing that the internet was the greatest invention of mankind in the history of mankind because it allowed us to not one to many, but many to many. We can hear each other at the same time, and this is the important part, in real time, right? That's the difference, right? So you have a vastly more efficient and vastly faster disbursement, dissemination of information, and that that ability is what can allow a renaissance, right? But the difference that the Renaissance really allowed was the scientific method to take hold.
So,
How do these things work? What do we
okay,
do
so you're
about them?
saying like information bombs are going to be more, I would say, viable, useful, and fruitful to eradicate the wickedness in our homelands. Essentially, am I correct on that?
Close. So it gives the context and it gives the option, right? So
Right.
the actual difference that's required, because this is what came out of the printing press, was the U.S. Constitution, right? Is like the U.S. themselves, like you guys yourselves, like the birth of the nation came about because of the dissemination of information at scale, and people were like, I believe with that, I don't like that anymore, and they organized, and this is the key. The revolution or the Renaissance, if you want to think of it this way, the Renaissance needs to be how we as a civilization, humanity, are organized. That's the difference, right? Because right now we are organized through our financial institution into these different areas of the planet that are still administered by essentially the oligarchy. That's BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the central banks, all these other idiots that are
Amazon,
all in
yeah,
control. Yeah, all of
Federal
these other idiots,
Reserve.
right? Yeah, all of them, right? But that is a structural creation that we created that which means we can create better systems too. Like people like to think
Right.
that the democracy that we have right now is the best that we could ever have. It's absolutely not. It's so inefficient, it's so corrupt, it's so stupid in so many ways. And that's because the system has never been upgraded to a point that we have a system that's specifically designed for everyone to be successful. Now that might sound a little bit utilitarian and utopian, but the underlying idea there is that is the golden rule. How do we have a civilization that doesn't require me killing somebody else or getting robbed by somebody else for us all to be successful in some way? Now that's not communism in
Yeah,
any way, but the
sure.
thought experiment hasn't even been done to build a system like that.
Well, that's a good segue. While we're going to segue now to the war on finances. Let's transition here, and
Hmm.
because the war is on all fronts. It's
Hmm.
a war of duality. It's
Hmm.
a generational war. It's a cultural war. It's a gender war. It's a country, community. Yeah, there's plenty of wars to go around, but the one that affects people the most outside of the psychological war is the financial wars.
Hmm.
And it's one of the most deadliest because it creeps up on you. When you go get your box of Lucky Charm cereal, and it was like $3.50 just weeks ago, and it goes up to $6. 6 months later, if that. You're like, oh, it's getting expensive, but it happens in increments, and that's what's sinking people. For instance, in Canada right now, I heard a woman who was at a Justin Trudeau rally, believe it or not, and she grabbed the mic and she was crying, and she was saying, I have to literally work 60 hours a week now to make sure we have the basic utilities in my household, on top of paying your carbon tax that they're now implementing throughout Canada.
Hmm.
So, is BRICS the answer to the oligarchy virtual Berlin Wall that has been built over time? Is BRICS the answer? Because 70% of the countries of the world, they're saying yes, it is.
Probably not. I give it probably a 10 or 20% chance that it is, and here's why, for two reasons. So one is that China is going to control that, and that automatically makes it a non sequitur and a non starter, because China is the only thing that they care about is enslaving people and taking control of what they see as a threat, and they view their own people as a threat. That's why they spend more on internal domestic surveillance than they do on their military. So that should tell you all you need to know about that. So, secondly, even though gold is potentially I shouldn't say potentially. So, BRICS, the idea behind BRICS is that they're going to have a gold backed currency to be used for international trade between all of the signatory countries, which the G7 and the West is not going to be invited to. And so, there is definitely a risk and a threat to the US dollar hegemony that's happening right now, on top of the de dollarization that's happening to the petrodollar because of the sanctions that were put on Russia, right? So, there's a whole bunch of competing aspects to this. But the other reason that I don't think it's going to be a success in the way that you're talking about it is that it's only going to be for the powers that be. So to give you a little history, there's about 700 and I think 20 odd fiat currencies throughout human history. Okay, so that means like every major empire that's ever been had their own currency with some idiot stamped on the face of it, be like, hey, this is your favorite emperor or whatever, and they've all failed, right? And so you got to think that gold and silver, all of the gold and silver that's ever been mined throughout all of human history has not gone anywhere. Somebody somewhere has always controlled that, right? And what that means is that money or that currency, that value, that store of value that is used to buy resources has been brought forward throughout
Well,
time into and out of these various different
okay,
empires.
and that this is a really, really good assessment of it all, and but I want to maybe float and add some conjecture to this.
Hmm.
Is India doesn't seem to go along to get along. They're already having problems with just the rumor or the idea of being one currency with BRICS. They don't want to do it. They want to keep the ruble, which is smart. That's it had the UK switched to the euro dollar like Greece did, they'd be underwater even more so. And there's also a war with China that they have, a miniature war, a shootout, OK Corral style, at their borders with China over some disputed lands.
Hmm.
So I think there's a check to the power and the heavy hand of China. And then I would also add to that is there's two Chinas, like there's two Americas in a way. There's the corporation, and then there's the republic. You essentially have the CCP, who are 90 million strong, that don't even live in the homeland, the country of China. They're all over the place, heavily embedded in South America and Switzerland. So is it fair to say that the BRICS is a monetary correction around the world after so much damage by the central banking and the CIA? That it's a correction on just the innocent front of that, for starters, and another power mechanism or tool maneuver by Xi Jinping to do what he can to rid the CCP out of the People's Republic. Do you see credence to any of that kind of an angle?
So there's a couple different levels to that. So I'll kind of go through them. So let's start with India. Okay. So India is kind of a question mark for a couple of different reasons. So it's, again, say what you want about Modi. The guy's not stupid. He's very much aware of his difficult geographic and political situation, being that or sorry, India rather, is allied with the West and has been for a long time. But also that they're next door to China, and the BRICS nation, of which they are part of, is potentially a counterbalance. So what India is actually doing right now is playing both sides against the center. So they're essentially hedging their bets, right? So they're in BRICS. They recently stated, I can't remember exactly what came out of it, but they recently said that they weren't going to be a part of it in the way that China probably wants them to be a part of it, but they are a part of it, right? But on the other side of that, India is also one of the major places on the planet that they were trying to push central bank digital currencies and cashless societies first. So a few years ago, Justin Trudeau actually went to India to support the protesters that were protesting. I don't know if you heard this term, but no farmers, no food, which is kind of a global thing that's happening right now. We can touch on that if you want. But that was something that was happening in India, and basically what happened was that India essentially tried to remove all of the cash and have everybody go cashless, and everybody shit a brick, and everybody freaked out and was like, "Yo, we're not doing this." And Rishi Sunak, the current prime minister that was selected for Britain, his
Right.
family is actually one of the groups of people that were instrumental in trying to push that forward in India. So his family is literally one of the major groups of people that are pushing central bank digital currencies in
What a
Britain as well.
small world. And by the way, you probably don't know, we in late 2020, we made the announcement that Richie Sunak would be the next prime minister.
Oh, really? I don't know. Yeah, good
Yeah,
call.
we knew that was coming. They took control of Boris when he was trying to correct the balance of power just in the UK
Hmm.
and give more industry to the north, like Manchester and what have you. Because that's interesting. So, saying India has a foot in, foot out, and I see South Africa the same too.
Yeah,
Because they're.
South Africa is their position is much weaker. Like I have a friend that actually just came back from South Africa.
Tell me
And
about it, because they seem to be posturing more and more towards the EU and shaming Russia for Ukraine, but then they want to be in BRICS. It's like a conflict of interest, don't you think?
Big time. But the problem with South Africa is they're basically collapsing. Like my friend was there, like they had power outages for about 40 or 60% somewhere in there of the time that he was there. Like their economy and their
It's
infrastructure is
collapsing,
basically collapsing. Yeah. So
really.
like yeah. So like really think of what BRICS is right now. So Brazil, who is a clown show by itself. They literally took Lula out of prison via extrajudicial means by one of the Supreme Court justices that
Hmm.
didn't say anything. They basically took him out of prison to run. They essentially that election was an obvious sham, never got investigated. So he's now the PM or the president or whatever. You've got Russia, which is currently at war with the West. You've got China, which is also at war with the West. You've got India, that's one foot out, and you got South Africa, that's basically collapsing. So the only reason that BRICS is even a possibility and even a potentially a success is because the U.S. has bungled their abilities and their positions so badly for so long that nobody trusts them anymore. Like, and I knew this was going to happen as soon as they put the nuclear option on Russia, because as soon as you tell everybody that you don't play by the rules that
Right.
everybody else has to play by, and you give that double standard, everybody on that lower tier of that double standard would be like, well, if I don't get to play with everybody else with the same rules, why the hell would I be part
Well,
of your crew?
and it also creates an arms race
Yeah, it's a
because,
financial arms race.
financial arms race, and then Iran's going to say, "Well, we want nukes too because we don't trust the U.S., who's the only superpower, historically speaking, that's actually used it on another country."
Oh,
So there's a lot of it's very colluded the way this administration, the deep state, let's say, the
mm-hmm,
military industrial complex. I don't think a lot of the world hates Americans. I think they may hate the policy because we are the culture that gets sold all over the world.
mm-hmm.
America raps. Well, we have rappers now. Well, we had one in Canada. His name was Snow. Everyone wants to be Americans.
Well, and even after everything that we've talked about today, right?
Mhm.
Everybody on the planet still wants to go to like North America because that's the promised land. Like we, collectively in the West are known as the golden billion to the rest of the world. That you guys have all the freedom, you have all the opportunity, and you have all the good things in the world. When people are coming to North America, they're looking for opportunity, a better life for their families, and they want to live a better life, right? So what does that tell you? Is that we in the West are lucky in the fact in the sense that we've created these systems, and these institutions that allow us to live a life like this, where we don't have to generally worry about getting stabbed or
Right.
killed walking down the street. We
Right.
don't have this crazy authoritarian
We
government, all
created
that
the
stuff.
middle
Yeah,
class. We
yeah,
created the middle class. No one else
yeah.
has done it. Mexico doesn't have it. They have the highest millionaires per capita and the poor of the poor. We
Hmm.
created the middle class, which is a threat to the banking cartel that wants to make us, serfs and
Hmm.
squandering peasants, as you articulated earlier. But now is a time where people are trying to say, okay, do we do bank runs? Do we get into crypto? People don't know what to do. We have a retiring generation now of baby boomers that they're scared. They're losing their social security,
Hmm.
and it's going to get to a point where if you don't take the miracle jabs in Canada or the US and maybe certain places, well,
Hmm.
they're not going to give you your social security, your retirement if you don't do what the policy says. So people are looking for answers. I came across you, Bryce, and you're a lot different than a lot of people that approached me with solutions they want to share with viewers all over the world. So let's talk about New World precious metals because we've all heard about gold, silver, precious metals, but it's not until you connected the geopolitical side to this that I started really paying attention.
You always have to put this in the context of what's actually happening. Okay, so a couple of the big economic problems that we're facing right now are really important, right? So you've got out of control inflation, which is basically caused by government spending. That's where inflation comes from. So they print money at interest into the economy. It goes places, does stuff. Inflation, like that's the really simple way to explain it. So you've got central bank digital currencies, which is a major threat to what we're doing. We've got a potential war with the East that's basically already started more or less. You've got out of control spending, which is jacking up the price of the debt itself. You've got interest rates that have also go up. So you've got all of these different problems. Okay, so that's the backdrop. Okay, so in times of difficulty, and I'll use the 1929 depression as an example of what we can look to as an example of what we're facing, because we're in a very similar. I can show you a graph if you want, but we're in a very similar situation to what was happening then as what's happening now. So right now, our stock market, all of these zombie companies are way overvalued for what they are, and there's going to come a correction. And this correction, and one of the reasons that all of this stuff is happening, is because they're going to use this correction as the reset, the great reset that Klaus Klaus Schwab is talking about, this is what he's talking about, right? So what you're going to have happen, and this connects with BRICS as well, and I'll connect it in a second. So what you have here is all of these financial problems that are all coming to a head. We've kicked this can down the road for about 15 years. So if we didn't basically bail out the economy in 2007 and 2008, we would have been going through the correction then. But because they printed ungodly amounts of money into the system, we kicked it off until now, and we've actually printed, three quarters or 80% or something of our current amount of money in the system in the last 3 years. So Canada doubled its debt over this time when this happened. So when you talk about solutions, right, there's really only have three options, and I'm going to make a case for two of them because the third one is crypto. And there's somebody to make a case for that. It's not going to be me. I'm not as big into crypto as I once was, basically because of the central bank digital currency, because they see Bitcoin and all these other which are essentially shitcoins and irrelevant, as a sorry?
Right, CBDC.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. CBDC,
Which,
central bank digital
by the
currency.
way, CBDC is entirely different than BRICS. They're
Yes,
completely opposite.
totally.
'Cause I was trying to tell someone that the other night. And she's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've been covering this for a year. That's like, anyways, I'll go on a tangent. Go ahead, Bryce, please.
What underpins the economy is actually gold and silver. Okay, because all of the central banks have gold and silver in their as collateral. So like the central banks and the Eastern authoritarians and the super high net worth individuals, everybody that's quote unquote smart money. This includes like Warren Buffett and not Warren Buffett specifically, but other types of investors like that and hedge fund managers and whatnot. They're all buying gold and silver like it's going out of style. They're draining the COMEX of what's available, and they're putting as much money as they can. And especially China is doing this. They bought like 30 tons of gold a month at the beginning of the year. So they're all buying precious metals because they know that at some point the U.S. dollar is going to go the way of every other fiat currency, and they're going to roll out the central bank digital currencies to replace it. And so one of the reasons that we're going into World War III is because the BRICS nations and the BRICS financial system is a direct threat to the Western hegemony, which is the U.S. dollar now, but eventually that'll be central bank digital currencies. And so I don't know how well connected the BRICS nations are to their central banks, because you have to know that there's only three countries on the planet right now that don't have a Rothschild central bank, which is Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Those are the only three countries. And when you know it, they're the axis of evil now. And I very much think that North Korea is the personification of an evil state, because the stuff that happens there is literally insane. But that aside for a second, like the underpinning of finances in general has always been gold, right? And so what's happening is that all of the people in the know are moving their assets towards this. And what's going to happen when people, like, if you think of that black swan moment that really wakes people up, like a nuke being dropped, or like Poland invading Belarus, or Russia invading a NATO country, some crazy event like that. If like Bank of America collapsed tomorrow or something like that, like that's going to be a wake up call for people that are like, oh, what do I do? And people are thinking about that now, and everybody goes and runs to gold and silver, because that's historically the only thing that really matters when your fiat currency gets printed out of existence. If you remember in just before World War II, the German I can't remember the name of their currency, but like they essentially printed it out of existence, where people had real barrels of money that they had to go to buy bread. Like that's the type of ridiculous that can happen when you hit hyperinflation. Your currency
That's
becomes
right,
worthless.
like
Yeah,
Venezuela.
exactly. And anybody that bought gold held on to their value. So whenever people ask me about what should I do, okay, I always tell them the same thing, and here's why. So number one is always hard assets, right? So what is actually value? Because the purpose of money is an intermediary, right? It's I'm going to give you this, and you're going to use this to go get some other sort of resources or
Right, it's a free exchange between free people that was never intended for central banking,
right.
because you can't have centralized economies. It never works out.
So the fundamentals that you have to, because I was talking about this briefly before, is that it's what you can do locally. So like food, water, guns, gold, ammo, that's the fundamental stuff that's always going to be valuable in your local area wherever you are. So hard assets, number one, and number two is gold and silver. And so when I first connected with you, this was one of the things that I really wanted to bring forward, because I have something for you guys. We want to make you guys an official affiliate, so that people in your audience can get connected to gold and silver.
Wow.
Because here's the thing: is that all of this smart money, like I was mentioning, is doing this one thing that everybody throughout history has always done when tough times are coming. And let me tell you, they are a coming very quickly and very fast, in lots of both, right? So the second thing that I would say, which is gold and silver, is you need some on hand no matter what. but you also need some in scale. Like you can't just move, $500,000 of physical gold. That's very difficult to do, and it's very hard to recapitalize if you want to do something like that. So at
Right.
New World Precious Metals, and the reason that I got connected to them is because they have a bunch of options for people depending on no matter what their situation is, they can help people protect their wealth. Because what's going to happen, and like I was just mentioning, is that once this starts to all collapse, it's going to go off a cliff, and they're going to start rolling out other problems. They're going to start doing lockdowns again. They're going to start, a war.
Right.
They're going to all sorts of different stuff is going to happen. And if you don't have the assets when that happens, you're not going to get them. So if you remember back in 2020, right, in the midst of the pandemic, there was the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, which was all demand side. Like no, there was no supply shortage. Everybody just collectively decided at one point that we're going to run out of toilet paper. And even here in Vancouver, and I'm in Vancouver, right? And so literally about a 15-minute drive from me, there's two major factories that do nothing but create toilet paper. So we would never run out of any of it ever, but nobody knows that, right? So everybody just made that decision. So when you actually have a supply side shortage, which could be food, for example, like what kind of chaos do you think that's going to happen? It's going to be every man for themselves, and there's going to be a lot of people hurt because violence is going to happen because people don't have the resources that they need in their local community, right? And so this is the type of stuff that you have to be prepared for, right? And so like speaking to your audience for a sec, I want you to think of what's important to you very briefly. Is it your family? Is it your assets? Is it your future? Like whatever it is, you need to do the math. How much food do I need for my family? How long can I survive for? If you don't have 3 months of food by now, you are sleeping, bro. You need food, you need defense, you need a plan, and you need a community. You will not survive what's coming unless you have a community of like-minded people that are going to protect each other and agree that, if we make a decision together, that shit happens. And that is very, very difficult to do because of everybody wants to be the main character and everybody wants to, have ego and whatever. But this is about survival now. Like we are all in the same game together. We are all in this game together. And if we don't win collectively, everybody loses collectively. So the most important thing you can do is whatever assets you have left, put them into something that is tangible and permanently valuable, which is hard assets and gold and silver. That will never not be valuable.
No, no, absolutely, Bryce. That's absolutely correct. I've only invested in hard assets like silver long ago. And I've always known that the silver market has been artificially blown up and then dumped by the banking cartels or China to push people away from having any kind of confidence in hard assets. But we're at that time now where the lessons in the that Ron Paul and his doctorate told us about from 10 years plus ago, well, now it's more valuable now than any time ever. We have a huge Canadian audience, so this could actually help people.
Definitely, and so to my Canadian brothers and sisters out there, this is something that you cannot escape from. There's nowhere to run, and there's a lot of people. And I don't know if you know this or not, Dean, but there's been a lot of people already leave Canada, even though our population just hit about 40 million this year, and it's about 40 and a quarter million now. Like we have a huge amount of immigration, like per capita, far higher than the U.S. right now,
Yeah,
and
because a lot of you go to Mexico too, but they're finding that place not as you know peaceful and tranquil as they thought it would be.
I would never move out of my country when shit hits the fan because for a lot of this stuff, like I'm a white guy, right? Around the world, we're not looked at very favorably in some respects now. And if they know, like, hey bud, you got a bunch of money, I want it, and there's nothing
Mhm.
stopping me because everything is collapsing. I don't, at least here I know that I'm around people that are like me
That's
in the
crazy.
sense that we're North American, right? So, but the point that I want to make is that there's nowhere to escape from what's coming. We are one planet, and the oligarchy controls all of it. So whatever you do, you have to do it with the intention that this is something to protect your family and your future, right?
Right.
Because there's no way that you can escape what's coming. There's nowhere that you can go and hide. And there's lots of people that have moved out of the country, and there's lots of people that move into the interior and stuff. I was considering doing the same thing, but I'm still preparing for war. I put all of my money into silver because I want to be able to move it with me at a moment's notice, because I like silver more than gold personally, because I think there's a higher upside, but that's just me. But the point that I'm making is no matter what you decide to do, you have to do it with other people, because that's what society is. That's what civilization is. We live in a world of other people, right? If you can't do anything in a vacuum. The decisions that you choose to make, and the actions that you decide to take have a visceral impact on the world around us. And this is one of the lies that we've been sold forever, is that we just believe if we give power to our favorite politician that they're going to work in our best interest,
Right.
and they're not. We have to be the arbiters of our future, and until we do that at scale, we're at the mercies of our evil overlords.
What a perfect kind of crescendo to kind of conclude on. And I think the point that you're essentially making is in this small world is every move you make, every step you take, they'll be watching you. Yeah,
Absolutely. That's
I
never
caught that
been.
too,
That's so
Bryce.
good.
I love the police as well. You not getting that by on me. On that note, I want to thank our neighbor to the north there, who took some time out from that riot in the metropolitan area behind him to be here. And I got to compliment him. What a savvy dresser for a rioter. I mean, can you imagine? If you saw that guy with the big screen TV just running, you'd think, oh, wow, he must be late for an appointment. You know? But Bryce, it's been a pleasure. I could go 3 more hours, and we'll have you back and schedule a more honed in approach to some of these topics and such. And I'd love to get into the Mexico Refuge Center for Canada, and we'll get your perspective on that. And
Yeah, it's not gonna be a pretty one.
yeah, we'll see how that works. Well, thank you, Bryce Wade, everybody. Geopolitical all-star in my book. Thank you very much, Bryce.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, my man.
Absolutely. Same here. You talk about China running the show, and where I see a problem with that is India is not going to get a go. Fuck, hold on, God, I hate when I do this.
All good, man.
Yeah, I'm thinking about those riots behind you. You might join them.
Eventually, yeah, probably.
I'm like, man, you dress up for your riots.
I would dress up like this. I'm not going to be some beggar being like, "Hey, give me free money."
I'm going to wear my top hat, my white gloves. All right, here we go.
As Joe Blow in Timbuktu or wherever the hell they are in Africa or South America or wherever, the vast majority of those people are living in. I shouldn't say that. That's probably pretty insulting. So let me backtrack that. A lot of them are living under authoritarian.
Let me try that again. I got to fix that in it. And that's what we're trying to provide. And we found each other, and this is how it all started. Is you are providing some. Let me up too. Hold on, God. I'm thinking about all these old people. But thank you very much, Bryce. Bryce, everybody, up too. Let me make sure I have 129. God, I'm so terrible.